Greetings, everyone. Hello. It's Tuesday again. Didn't the week go fast? I'm Dr. Dina McMillan, and it is time again for Heart and Mind with Dr. Dina McMillan. This is a really interesting and necessary and important episode. We're going to talk about the hypocrisy of selective outrage. And as always, while it is easier to see in some groups than others, everything we talk about, I want you to also make sure that you are not falling prey to the same problem. Now, so let's get started and welcome, welcome, welcome. I have promised you no more boring Tuesdays. Tuesday is the day where restaurants have sales, where if you're going on a trip, they tell you, hey, book it on Tuesday because you'll get a better price. If you're going to a hotel, go on a Tuesday because nobody's there. We have this on Tuesday. And we talk about things from a perspective that other people don't dare touch, either because they have a different interest or they have a different knowledge base, but it's key information that I'm sharing with you. Now, we are live on X, Daily Clout, Facebook, Getter. But if you miss the live episodes, or if you want to show an episode to someone else, or if you just want to rewatch an episode you missed or an episode was interesting and you want to watch it again, you can see it on Rumble. I usually download the episodes on my X feed. So at Dr. Dina 1, you can go on Daily Clout, you can find it there, and you can go on YouTube. All of the episodes are on all of those forums. So no excuse for missing the information. Now, why is this information so different, so key, so compelling, so necessary? Because I'm a social psychologist. Most people, until they watch this show, don't know what social psychology is. Maybe they got a glimpse of it from watching Amy Cuddy when she did her power poses, her wonderful TED Talk that's had like 40 million views. She studies power dynamics, which is one of the things we look at in social psychology. And she talked about how holding your body for 2 minutes in a certain posture can actually make you project different energy that unknowing people will actually pick up for you. So if you haven't watched it, go ahead and watch it. But that's what social psychologists do. But unfortunately, that's not all we do. We also study how people learn. Okay, that's positive. But we also look at how to influence, persuade, manipulate, coerce, indoctrinate, brainwash. And we don't just look at organic situations that happen in the world. Social psychology and social psychologists do studies to figure out how to influence people's beliefs and behavior without alerting them that it was an external force pulling the strings. So we actually study how to use movement, light, language, imagery, anything you can think of to get you to do things that we want you to do, or whoever's doing the study wants you to do, and get you to take full responsibility for it. That's sinister, isn't it? Which is why I often have a very sinister image when I talk about social psychology. Now, speaking of sinister, please, please, please go to Amazon, get your own copy of the Pfizer papers. This is really important work. These are the studies done by Pfizer that they went to court and tried to get permission to hide this information for 75 years. They didn't want you to know. The court said no. And so Dr. Naomi Wolf, Amy Kelly, a whole crew of really highly qualified people went in, took a deep dive, deciphered the language of those studies, the findings of those studies, and put it in something that is made for the mainstream public. Keep in mind, not one person who was responsible for the vaccinations, for the hospital policies, for the mandates, forcing people to get that vaccine, none of them have gone to jail. What does that mean? It means that if they got away with it, the probability is good that it will happen again. How do we keep it from happening again? We really pay attention to how it was done. So get your copy of the Pfizer papers so you can protect yourself and your family. Now, today's topic, this topic was recommended by my good friend, Belinda Richards, who's going to be joining us in a little while. We had a conversation, as we always do, and she just said the hypocrisy of this selective outrage that we constantly keep coming up against is infuriating. So we need to talk about, what do we mean by this? Also, how do you spot it? Not only it's easy to see in someone else, we'll talk about that, but how do you spot it in yourself? And what does it cost you if you're one of these people? We're going to talk about that, so I want you to stay with me. Don't go anywhere. Take a drive through any major city after sunset, and you'll notice something strange. Dark windows, empty offices. Right now, 1 in 5 commercial buildings in America is sitting vacant, and nearly $1 trillion in real estate loans are coming due this year. If those buildings stay empty, the banks take the hit. And those are the same banks where your retirement savings are likely to sit. There's a new free report called The Ghost Tower Signal that breaks it all down. It uncovers 7 early warning signs that showed up before every major crash since 1929. All 7 are active again right now. This won't make the evening news, but it could help you protect your savings from what's coming. Download it free at cloutgold.com or just call 855-803-GOLD to get your copy mailed directly to you. That's cloutgold.com or call 855-803-GOLD. Now, why are we talking today about selective outrage? Because it's more than just, it's a natural inclination to be more supportive of our group, whatever that group is, and more critical of them, capital T. But that kind of tribal thinking, it causes people to hyper-focus and exaggerate the wrongs of their opponents while ignoring or rationalizing the crimes of their own group. What happens when people do that? You can have your own group go so far that it falls off a cliff, which is what we're seeing often with the left. People are asking, how did the left start going so fast, so wrong? This is one of the ways. They demanded such extreme tribal thinking that people were not allowed to criticize their own group. Therefore, when they were going in the wrong direction or doing something was unjust and unfair, nobody was allowed to say anything about it. Now, I have to be honest here. You know, if you've watched Heart and Mind with me before, that I try to cover issues that are general, that even if we see something more on one side than the other, I try to cover it for both sides. However, I have to be fair and go where the evidence takes me. And the evidence says you are more likely to think like that if you are left-wing than if you are on the right. There have been a lot of studies that have shown there is more latitude given for diversity of thought among the right than there is the left. With the left, there is a narrow narrative and everyone has to sign on or else. So the right does not have those same expectations of total conformity or you get excluded from the group. Now, before let's look at what we're going to do. This is going to be interesting. You're going to learn something you didn't know if you watch this. It's not going to be painful. It's going to be informative. You keep watching this show, you're going to be so much more smarter than all of your friends. You're going to be so much more informed when you see things happen in real life. You're going to understand what they mean and what the implications are, not just now in a broader context, but also where it could lead if people don't pay attention. So I want you to stay with me. Most people think inflation is the biggest threat to their savings, but there's something just as dangerous, and most banks never talk about it. It's the gap between what inflation is doing and what your bank is paying you. Right now, the average savings account pays well under 0.5%. One-year CDs barely do better. Meanwhile, inflation is still running several times higher than that. That difference acts like a hidden tax on your money. Every year, your dollars quietly lose buying power, even though your balance looks like it's the same or it's increasing even slightly. And policy doesn't help. A weaker dollar may boost exports, but it also pushes up the cost of imports, energy, and everyday goods. That's one reason why assets like gold and silver have surged. So what's a saver supposed to do? Some people are moving into short-term treasury bills. Others focus on dividend growth stocks that increase payouts over time. But there's another approach that doesn't get talked about much. It's a long-established company operating decades before AI became the buzzword that's now positioned to benefit from the AI boom in a disciplined way. Over the last 25 years, this approach has delivered an average annual return of 29% without chasing ultra volatile stocks in the tech industry or making risky speculations. If you'd like to learn more about what some investors are calling the 29% account, you can find the details at the link. Because when it comes to your savings, playing it safe may be the riskiest move of all. Go now to www.secret29account.com. Again, that's www.secret29account.com. So, we're going to talk about the various aspects of the mindset behind selective outrage. And since it was her idea, I am bringing my friend Melinda Richardson, influencer, coming to us from Brisbane, Australia, where it is Wednesday morning. Hi, Melinda. How are you?
Oh, I'm so glad to be back on the show. It's just been, life's been so crazy, and I've missed hanging out with you on this show. It's such a great place to be. Everything you say is just so relevant and so poignant for right now. It's I just really hope that a lot of these messages get through to a lot of people now, because it really is time, and I think a lot more people are jumping on board and waking up, which is great.
Well, it's important to know these things because this is the kind of knowledge that actually turns into power. You know, they say knowledge is power, but this is specific to what's going on now, how we're being influenced, how other people are being influenced. And I know this isn't random. This isn't theoretical. I see this happening with the people I work with. I see these influences on my own family. I've talked about the fact of being totally ostracized by my family because they think because I don't support left progressive ideology that I'm a bad person. Yeah. I would love for many aspects of left-wing ideology to be true, but they're just not. It's wishful thinking. It's like believing in the tooth fairy throughout your life. We
Yeah.
have to adults and work with how human nature works. We have to work with how people influence each other. One of the advantages people have who are very practical and down to earth, which is why I've always had a lot of working class followers, because when you're an electrician, you can't put things together based on they look pretty or this wants to identify as something that goes this way. If it doesn't work, it causes an absolute disaster and you see it right in front of you. So I found it's easier to be like that in academia, but we need to know what's going on. So I wanted to start out with just have us chat about the different aspects. And I put this sinister looking picture on purpose because
It is
I
sinister.
believe I believe that left progressives are actually part of a cult, and their moral judgments are based on group allegiance rather than any type of ethical principle. Many of the things that they applaud, condone, accept, if you on an objective perspective, it shows enormous harm. So part of supporting their views is the necessity for hiding the actual outcomes of their beliefs. So I get so tired, I'm sure you do too, of the behavior itself being secondary to who commits it. So we've even seen a lot of independent journalists and young people going and interviewing random people who progress themselves, who express themselves and identify themselves as left progressive, whether they're Democrats in the States, Labor in the UK or Australia. And they ask them questions and say, what would you say if a politician did A, B, C, and D? And they identify it as a right-wing person doing it. And these people are so critical. Oh my God, that just shows how horrible they are. And then the person stops and said, oops, sorry, that wasn't a right wing person that did it. That was a left wing person that did that. And then all of a sudden they backtrack. I've not yet seen one that said it's still wrong. Whoever did it. No, they backtrack and start rationalizing why it was okay. That's a moral judgment that comes along with the mindset that goes with that selective outrage. And it's not strictly hypocrisy. It's actually a psychological strategy. They need to protect their identity as a left-wing person. They can't afford to acknowledge how much bad stuff goes on with their group. They tell themselves they're defending values. They're just defending their identity as part of that group. They're defending the group itself as being a moral right and a moral good. And it's exhausting. Here we go with another one. Motivated reasoning. Here's another way. Unconsciously evaluating information in a way that protects pre-existing beliefs, affiliations, or moral self-image. And in case you're well-read and understand this stuff, if you're looking at this and saying motivated reasoning, doesn't that lead to confirmation bias? Yes, it does. So motivated reasoning means you will spot information that confirms what you believe and protects your way of believing, your affiliations, your moral self-image, and try to overlook anything that doesn't work that way. It's the same behavior, but it has different standards. Evidence is scrutinized when it threatens identity, but accepted uncritically when it confirms it. So it's like when Melinda, have you had this happen when you're talking to someone who's left progressive and they scream at you, what's your source? Why are you saying that?
Yeah.
I used to take the time to actually provide journal articles and books. I didn't even find mainstream materials so that somebody didn't have to get a degree to understand why I was saying what I was saying. They always find a way to dismiss the validity of what I send. They don't even look at it.
Look, I think it's a very, very big problem in our society now that we have been bullied into being having a certain thought process and certain things that people want us to believe because they want us to believe what they believe. And they can't handle the fact that there are a group of people, a growing group of people out there that are now turning against left progressiveness. And they're sick of being bullied, and they're sick and tired of being asked for sources, and they're sick and tired of being yelled at and screamed at, and they're sick and tired of having their opinions, and even if the opinions are based on fact, being dismissed and being argued with. The bottom line that what we're seeing at the moment is we're seeing a bit of a chickens are coming home to roost now in Western civilization. And one of the results of all of this left progressiveness and this bullying and cajoling and yelling at people and media bias and screaming and ranting and raving, which no one wants to be on the receiving end, let's face it. But one of the results of that has been the quietening down in the last couple of decades of conservative values and a really good sort of set of core values that have done Western civilization quite proud. A quietening down of that and a smothering of those, and those are now starting to come back up to the surface because people are now seeing the extremities of letting men in women's bathrooms, allowing certain cultures to rape and pillage white women and girls in Western civil societies. There, this whole idea that there's this two-tier policing going on in Western civilization as well, where if you're a so-called victim or minority, you get preference now over people who are following the law, who have a good conservative core values. I think what we're seeing now is a little bit of a tipping point coming. And I have absolutely been cajoled and bullied, absolutely what you say, Dina, but I've held the line. And I remember I was at school in grade 5, and this was a turning point in my life, but I didn't realize this until I was an adult. My grade 5 teacher said to me when I was trying to be a people pleaser in the classroom, and I was younger than everyone else in the classroom as well. And she said to me, Melinda, have the courage of your convictions. You don't have the courage of your convictions. And in life, that's what's important. Now, of course, I was young and I didn't really understand until I was probably in my mid to late 20s what that actually meant. And that's what I've been living by. And that's what conservatives live by. So conservatives will criticize other conservatives if they know that core values and they know the difference between right and wrong because they have the courage of their convictions. Whereas this sort of collectivism from the left, this kind of blind collectivism is taken people away from their moral compass.
Well, I look at the motivated reasoning. I use this purposely. This woman is standing there, and if you hear her actual speech, first of all, her voice does not fit her appearance. She has this soft, pretty voice that you would never think coming. You'd think she'd have a deep, shrieking voice, but she doesn't. But she was talking about white people being demons, and
yes.
Can you imagine?
I have seen this.
Can you imagine a white person reversing that, saying all Black people are, all Hispanics are, all Asians are anything?
Yeah.
There would be such outrage. And she not only says this proudly, she keeps going further. So what it is about that motivated reasoning of only paying attention to anything that strengthens your existing views and having a moral compass that says my side is always correct.
That's right.
It allows people to feel morally principled while behaving inconsistently. She's talking about racism as a bad thing, and her claims are just definitional racism.
And the thing is, this idea that Black people in America in the last couple of decades have now been given permission, and I don't say all Black people clearly. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are Black, and I mean, they're fabulous people. But I'm talking about progressive left Black women in particular who absolutely hate white people, and they think they're totally justified in coming out and putting that hatred of white people up on a pedestal and really putting the megaphone behind it, because they think that they live in such a tight little progressive bubble that they think all other Black people are going to feel the way they feel. And
well,
that
racism
is absolutely fine. I can be racist because
but it's what's worse is they get white people to believe it. You get golly,
that's really bad. And the Hollywood video that came out the other day, where these white Hollywood actors are coming out and talking about being white and being ashamed of being white and guilty. And I was just, you know what? I just get so horrified that these people are influencers. And I mean, whether you like it or not, these people are influencers in society.
Highly influential.
Vulnerable young white women or men looking at this sort of stuff when they're in their sort of mid to late teens and really, you know, looking at their favorite actor, telling them that they should be ashamed of the skin color they're born with. It's so horrendous. It's not even it's just so horrendous.
They do the same thing to men. Oh, and before we move on, because we're going into moral licensing, because what I'm showing is some of the undercurrents, some of the psychological basis for that selective outrage, for that mindset. But before we move on, you said something, because looking at the UK and looking at Europe and looking at Australia, you have a huge proportion of Middle Eastern, African, and developing country men who believe that they are justified in sexually preying on young white women. I just wanted to remind my audience, in case you didn't know, in the United States, one of the groups that's preyed upon the most in childhood is young Black girls. Young Black girls are the most likely to be trafficked.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that it's only white girls in places where most of the people are white, but in the States, and it's gone on for 50, 60 years, because probably longer, because the Black culture is not, Black people, especially poor people of all colors, are not valued to the same extent as middle class and above. So when these
and you see that also, you do see that in Southeast Asian countries as well, and that's been going on for decades as well. And I think it's this is the tragedy of listening and allowing a civilization to be taken over by this sort of narrow selective outrage that we're going to discuss today, because it leaves out all of the other things that are going on in our society that we have the ability to address, but we don't pay attention to it.
No, we don't pay enough attention. Let's talk about moral licensing. Claiming they're on the right side of history. We hear that a lot. The people with selective outrage often feel psychologically licensed to excuse, minimize, or rationalize wrongdoing by their own side. I tell you what, being someone who's conservative, I wouldn't say I'm hyper conservative, but I am pretty conservative. If somebody does something that I don't like or somebody else doesn't like, boy, they get yelled at by their own side. That doesn't happen on the other side.
That's exactly right, Dina. That's just happened in Australia just yesterday. Pauline Hanson came out, and as you know, she's gaining massive amounts of traction in Australia now because people are so desperate because our country's going down pretty fast. So Pauline's a straight talker, and that's what people want. They just want someone to do straight talking. But Pauline did come out yesterday and say something that I didn't agree with. I don't agree with a lot of what Pauline says or how she does vote in Parliament, but I do agree with a lot of what she does say. But the thing about conservatives is when Pauline came out yesterday and said all Muslims are bad people, look, I think that is a generalization, and it's clearly not true. It's clearly something that doesn't help the situation here in Australia. We've obviously had our Islamic terrorist attack at Bondi Beach a couple of months ago, which has really shaken Australia and taken us into a very dark place. But I think saying things like that doesn't help. And the Conservatives in Australia did come out and say to her, look, you're a conservative. You're obviously a person that we agree with a lot of what you say, but that's something that we don't agree with. And these statements aren't helpful. And you see conservatives holding other people to account if core values are being compromised. And that's the biggest difference. We don't have selective outrage. We don't. Things are right and wrong. We have our core values, and that was a prime example in Australia that just happened, actually, which is very pertinent to this show today.
Well, if you look at this one, the third one, which if you screenshot it, says we can't criticize them right now. There are bigger enemies. I hear that a lot when I look at things like it is. If you look up pride parades, and in fact, when I was working in the LGBT community back in the earlier 2000s. And when I went to my first pride parade, I was absolutely appalled by what I saw. It was just so outrageously depraved. And the fact that anybody would first of all say that is a culture that needs to be condoned. I don't believe any culture has ever thrived by condoning depravity, whatever the sexual orientation of the persons involved. And to bring children to that, it's really easy. If you go on any other source other than Google, because Google tries to hide this stuff, but you find a lot of people bringing children into these environments, and it's absolutely horrendous. But we
really do. We have not done a good job in the last number of decades protecting our children in our society. We have not done a good job. Our scorecard is very poor.
Well, and also let's look at adults with moral licensing. Look at how much these two got away with, continue to get away with. Neither one of them is in jail. If you look at Hunter's laptop and the imagery on the laptop, a lot of those girls are obviously underage. One is a small child.
Yeah.
And excuses made and nothing done.
It's interesting too that I see every single day, and I just don't understand why Trump's lawyers aren't having an absolute field day, but every single day there are leftist influencers that call Trump a pedophile and a rapist, and they're influencers, and they have a lot of people that follow them. I mean, a pedophile and a rapist every day. There's memes made up about it. I mean, you need to be very careful when you go around calling people rapists and pedophiles. And, they turn the blind eye to the Bidens and the Clintons, but they scream every day about that. And there's just no evidence of that at all.
Well, also, here's another issue that people have. In-group bias and identity fusion. When whatever group you identify yourself with, you see that as who you are. It's not just what you do. It's who you are. And it is very vulnerable. It's delicate. When identity becomes infused with the cause, criticism of behavior is experienced as an attack on you or on the group itself. And so people become really hostile if you say that behavior. I use this guy a lot because he's just so representative of.
You keep showing that picture.
I know. I want to torture my audience. Okay. Now
we are supposed to celebrate these people. We have been told.
I never did. Even working in the community, what's interesting. I got a lot of respect in the community because my principles are not. I'm not willing to compromise. I wouldn't celebrate obvious mental illness. What happens is it causes cognitive dissonance. It causes real discomfort. And people think because the word cognitive is there, that it's discomfort in the brain. It is psychological and mental discomfort. But when you feel severe cognitive dissonance, it literally feels like you got punched in the gut. So you actually feel it in your body. Your heart rate increases. It is physically so uncomfortable to have cognitive dissonance. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. That's why I put a little asterisk there. Defensiveness replaces reflection. So you can't even talk about it. They just won't talk about it. Harm is reframed as necessary, strategic, or misunderstood when it's our side. But when it's the other side, everything they do is the end of the universe as we know it. Here's some more consequences of this in-group bias and identity fusion. Whistleblowers are punished more harshly than offenders. So if you show up, what's going wrong in your own group, you are treated worse than the people who are committing the crimes. Challenges are more likely to result in aggression and violence, like this 8647 we've talked about before, where people are advocating to actually assassinate our president. Now, number 4 is cognitive dissonance management. Again, it shows a head, but don't just think head. Think head, think heart, think gut. Okay? Severe incongruence arises when people hold two conflicting beliefs. When you come across information that disputes what you believe to be true, it makes you, all of us, really, really uncomfortable. Now, in certain environments, in certain mindsets, if you have a growth mindset that we've talked about extensively before, that discomfort is less and it's more fleeting. Because you'll say, okay, I need to find out more about this. After you get over the initial reaction, you say, okay, I need to find out more about this. If you haven't reached that stage, yeah, it can get really ugly. So what people do when they experience cognitive dissonance, they deny the harm. They don't look, they don't want to hear it. They'll turn away, they'll hide. They'll minimize the severity. They'll say, oh, it wasn't that bad. They'll attack the messenger. They'll recast the victims as the actual villains, like the way that in the UK, they blamed those young girls for being raped by the Pakistani rape gangs.
It's just so
this
shocking.
Is Darvo. This is a basic, but one thing I want to mention here, this is Darvo. This is actually a main tactic used by abusers to keep from being held accountable. So it's used in more than one context. It's used to not have to recognize that your side may not be as morally righteous as you believed, but it's also used to keep from taking responsibility for things that you do wrong. So abusers use this all the time. They'll deny, then they'll attack, then they'll reverse victim and offender. So yeah, this is how they handle the cognitive dissonance. And then we move on to willful blindness. It's not the absence of information, it's the active avoidance of knowing. It's why I stopped taking the time to go through my journal articles and things that I'd saved to send things to people that said, what is your source for having that opinion? I now tell them, use these buzzwords and look it up yourself. Because when I took the time to send them information, they always had an excuse why they couldn't read it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when people say, where's your source? It's like, I'm not here if you want to follow me, if you want to interact with me, if you want to challenge your own mindset, if you want to challenge my mindset, we can have a quick chat, but it's not our job to educate everybody in the nuances all the way down to the detail. Our job is to come out and express inconsistencies, hypocrisies, contradictions, and actually start to look at where we want our society to be and start to be a lot more forceful in describing what we want our society to look like and the vision. And so all of this other stuff is designed to put the brakes on what it is that, conservatives are trying to do out there, that really love and care for their countries and really love and care for their societies and want to start protecting what we have.
Well, one of the things I want to mention with this willful blindness is that when we talked about this before, what happens is that it can become so conditioned that even if something happens in front of you, we talked about the invisible gorilla experiment where people were so focused on the basketball passing back and forth, they didn't even notice somebody in a gorilla costume walking the middle. Yeah. Willful blindness does this. When you have a culture like the left progressive culture, where you are conditioned not to look, not to ask questions. Anybody that does is immediately labeled a bad person and punished harshly. It teaches you, just don't look. And of course, your brain is going to help you with this because your brain tries to keep you out of trouble. So if you think you'll get in trouble for asking questions, it's going to soften the impact. It's the same thing you see when you're in an abusive relationship. If you feel like you can't get out of that relationship, your brain will press the mute button on how much danger you're actually in. It's not you consciously saying, I'm just going to ignore this. This is your brain trying to protect you. But when you're dealing, that's why I said, if you find some good sources of information, put them in the notes section on your smartphone, but don't be surprised if initially, or even after 2 or 3 times, that the person you're arguing with won't even look, won't even consider. They'll look at a study done by 10 people and say things like, well, that 8th guy was cited in high school for plagiarism or they'll find some obscure reason to dispute whatever evidence that you've got, even if it's credible. So when you're dealing with willful blindness, it's extremely painful. And this willful blindness, let's talk about the willful blindness. Mainstream media often enables this by refusing to cover topics that dispute their preferred narrative, or by doing so in a very biased manner. I know that even on using search engines, trying to find information on Google, for instance, is often really tough because a lot that goes on. People have noted on X, we've had over the last 8 days, we've had 2 trans-identified people murder other people. And we would not know about it if you're not on X, because the mainstream media will not cover it. And if you don't hear about it, you don't know it's happening.
Dina, the reason why the mainstream media won't cover it is because it's something that they were supporting. So it makes them look just as bad as well. You know, it's something that they've openly, the progressiveness and the woke narrative is something that the mainstream media has been pushing now for a very long time. And as I was saying earlier today, you know, those chickens are coming home to roost. So mainstream media, of course, are culpable. And when you're culpable and when you're part of the problem, the best thing to do is to try and ignore it and move away, so you're not held accountable or responsible for the things that you were saying. And we saw this during COVID. We're seeing it with the transgender narrative. We're seeing it now with the grooming gangs and the rape gangs in the UK, where there was blind eyes being everywhere on all of these woke issues. And now a lot of these topics, a lot of the repercussions of what we have done and what we allowed to happen, and, you know, not knowing some of it because mainstream media weren't covering it, but being on social media, that's not really an excuse anymore. We're seeing some very dire outcomes in our society now.
I would add to the list the issues with single parenthood, the issues with divorce, the whole LGBTQ narrative about love being love and everything being equal, working in the community. I saw huge issues, prevalent issues in various countries. So I'm not just talking about one little community. And in order to find information on it, I had to look at studies done in the early 1990s because nobody was allowed to talk about it after that. Frank is here, Frank Brescia. He's been coming on. He said the media does their best to run cover for the trans agenda, as they did during COVID. It's pathetic. But again, it's not just trans. People keep picking on trans, but it's the whole LGBT. If you look further into what's going on there, there's a lot going on there that is very problematic. There's a lot going on with single parenthood. And when I'm looking at attempts to fix and address a lot of the issues in the Black American community, a lot of the issues arise because of the prevalence of single parenthood. And nobody talks about that either. Look at with the NGOs. I mean, so much. And working in both law enforcement and in politics, there were so many issues with various groups of people that were purposely hidden. Because if you find out about it, then if you see yourself as a moral person, you are required to take some kind of action. If you mention it, you could lose status in your group if nobody else wants to admit to this, because you'll have and you'll actually go up against and actually be punished by those still clinging to the beliefs. There's an internal reckoning. You have to say to yourself, oh my God, I was wrong. I was supporting something that is actually so harmful. And you have to acknowledge that you're vulnerable to manipulation. I can tell you, as a social psychologist, we're all vulnerable to manipulation. That's why one of the things I teach and talk about is how to protect ourselves from it. Now, let's talk. There are some serious psychological consequences of dealing with severe incongruence and willful blindness. These are the foundations of selective outrage. You have to notice a crime over here. You have to exaggerate the crime over here. You have to ignore everything that's going on behind you that may be much, much worse. Doing that is costly psychologically and emotionally. It causes moral fragmentation. So your values become situational rather than principled. So when something bad is done, your first question isn't who was harmed, how do we fix it, what happened? It's who was the perpetrator? Because if they're your group, your next step is not to address the issue or support the victim. It's to find a rationalization to support the perpetrator. Harm is only recognized when it's politically useful. Ethics become performative rather than internalized. All those people with the pro-Palestine protests, they don't even know where Palestine is. They totally ignored what happened 2 years ago in Israel, where these same people went through and brutally raped and murdered women, children, everything. That's to be ignored. But anything that happens to the Palestinians is to be put on a screen and sanctified. You look at the anti-ICE protests. Obama actually deported far more people than Trump has as yet. None of these people were protesting, and in much worse conditions. None of these people protested then.
Well, wasn't it Obama that actually had the children in the cages?
Yes. And your values switch to their opposite when convenient. And I know you've seen this, where some people on X especially have saved screenshots when the Trump administration first came out with the vaccine for COVID. You had so many left progressive influencers swear it was the worst thing ever, that they would never take it, that it was horrible, that he was trying to poison us all. The minute Biden supported the same vaccine being mandated and forced on people, then it was a necessity, and anybody that didn't get it should be totally shunned from society.
And also, they went further than that. They actually wished the people that didn't take the vaccine. Many influencers wished that the people that didn't take the vaccine would actually die. You know, the funny thing about that, which is interesting to me, goes to the heart of what this show's about today with this whole selective moral outrage and this selective ideology. First of all, the left turned medicine into ideology. Mm-hmm. And they did that by flipping sides between Trump and Biden. And not only did they flip sides, they went insane towards the unvaxxed. But the right and people like me who were really upset that Trump was going to put something out there that wasn't tested and that was potentially dangerous, even though it was Donald Trump, and even though we broadly supported Donald Trump, we were critical about that. We didn't allow our a sense of sort of loyalty to what Trump was trying to do with the country, and we didn't allow our broad support for the man to cloud our moral judgment on putting out a potentially untested, dangerous substance into everybody and mandating that. So therein lies that just that one example. Therein lies the key difference between people who have maintained their moral compass on the right side of politics and within their own conservative value system, and left progressives who follow a woke narrative to the detriment of their own internal moral compass.
I don't know if they have a moral compass anymore. When you are,
well,
one of the things that happens, if you only see harm if it happens from the other person, if you wait for somebody to tell you whether something is wrong or not, you become like a child. It causes all kinds. And here's another thing that happens when you have that kind of selective outrage, that moral compass, that is the moral fragmentation, leads to escalation of aggression. And we've seen this repeatedly. And I worried as soon as I started seeing people during the Black Lives Matter protests with the silence is violence sign, because and you had, again, the LGBT community, and this started well before Black Lives Matter, saying not agreeing that being gay is the same as being straight is violence against us.
Yes.
What that means is if this person attacks you, they can then say that to themselves and to other people, it was self-defense.
Yeah, of course, because they're using the word violence and once again, this is them weaponizing language and weaponizing words.
Oh man!
And bullying people through the weaponization of that language, and cajoling people, and basically abusing people through that. It is a form of abuse. And the thing is, with what we're seeing lately is this escalation of derangement and violence to the point now where it's forcing conservatives who are in the sort of moderate conservatives to wake up, because we cannot continue with this kind of threatening, deranged behavior, because we're seeing the results of that. We're seeing the results of that on the streets. We're seeing the results of that in the mass shootings. The trans violence is going up. The violence from Antifa has gone up. I mean, we are seeing, violence overall against Elon Musk when he was heading up Doge.
With my lovely photo, the guy is actually vandalizing a Tesla because somebody told them, the left progressives, that Elon Musk was a Nazi, so they felt validated in destroying his property. And what happens to this escalation of aggression, small transgressions by outgroups are treated as existential threats, while severe harm by their allies is downplayed. And here we can look at all of those women wearing the Handmaid's Tale red outfits while supporting Islam.
Yeah.
Where that sort of treatment for women is actually part of their political ideology. You don't see them protesting female genital mutilation. You don't see them protesting child marriage or forced marriage or stoning of women, or the fact that domestic violence is allowed. Men are allowed to beat their wives under Islam. You don't see them protesting any of that.
No, they don't. That's actually a really, really big problem that I have with leftist women in the Western society at the moment. I have a fundamental, I have a major problem with the lack of the cuddling up to cultures that abuse women and children. I cannot reconcile in my own mind under any circumstance that you would support at such an intense level cultural norms that actually abuse women and children. This is this is the one kind of paradox in our society at the moment that is really testing the patience of other women in Western civilization at the moment, is this paradox of supporting blindly a cause because you're told to support it, not because you really understand what's going on.
No matter how intelligent left progressive people are, they have been conditioned. This willful blindness, this selective thinking, this biased thinking is antithetical to critical thinking. You cannot be someone with real critical thinking who actually will ignore harm if it's from somebody you like. It's like the people who say, I support this cause because I knew a few people that were really nice and I like them.
Yeah.
You cannot allow emotion to override your understanding of what risks there are. And this is something I hate to talk about my own group, but this is something that women are highly prone to. And it causes our judgment often to be so poor. When you look at how many female judges are letting these predators out on the street.
Oh my goodness, female judges at the moment. I mean, we've seen the example this week of a Sudanese.
Describe it. They wouldn't. My audience wouldn't necessarily have known about this. Talk about this just a second. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, a female judge in Australia has just told that this Sudanese violently raped a girl who, and when she was sentencing him to whatever pathetic little sentence she was giving him, that he was an outstanding young man with a bright future. Now, when you're
he only got 2 years for a brutal rape because he was Black and because
he was
Sudanese. Oh, his early life was very difficult. No sympathy at all for the victim. No understanding of what a clear and persistent threat this young man remains in the society.
Of course, my response to that was I wonder what judgment she would pass if it was actually her that was severely raped and brutalized. What would she think then as a judge if she was the victim and if she was the one that was raped? I can't understand how woke white women around the Western world and Black women
yes, because Black women are just as bad.
All woke women, to be honest. And Hispanics, there's some Hispanic woke women in the mix as well who are big influences. I will never understand how they turned against women. I will never understand how they.
It was done incrementally. We can actually do a show as how did people get lured into this cause? Now, speaking of woke Black women, we have Jada Pinkett Smith here. And a few days ago, she wore this Harris AOC 2028 t-shirt with a red hat. And red hat, for anybody that's overseas, represents the MAGA movement. So everybody knows that the red hat has to do with Donald Trump. And the hat said, "Is he dead yet?" So escalation of aggression through these moral fragmentation, through this selective outrage, through this, willful blindness, it causes dehumanization.
Well, I mean, if you're wishing someone dead, like it doesn't matter how much I despise a person. And I despise a lot of people in society right now. I mean, I actually, you can understand how you can actually hate certain people in society because of their actions and behaviors right now. But in no point in my humanity, and never at any point do I wish a person be murdered. I mean, that you lose, as you say, Dina, you lose your humanity once you've crossed that line. And to me, it's a very, very prominent line in the sand. It's thick, it's black. Once you cross that line of moral depravity and of having no moral compass whatsoever and losing your humanity, then as far as I'm concerned, you no longer have you should no longer have any kind of attention paid to you. You should not be.
But it's the opposite.
Yeah, but instead what we do is we attention seek.
They get more attention. And it also, another effect of having this mindset, it gives you psychological rigidity. It reduces your cognitive flexibility. You become less capable of nuance, intolerant of ambiguity, increasingly reactive instead of responsive. Reactive is driven by primal drives like anger, fear, tribal belonging, lust, hunger, and not responsive, which is taking in, that's the neocortex, that's problem solving, taking in the
Yes.
information and making the best choice. Increasingly reactive, increasingly aggressive, increasingly vindictive. Psychological rigidity is associated with high anxiety, anger dysregulation. We see that all the time. Black and white thinking, you're either with us or without us. Anybody on our side is good. Anybody that doesn't think like we do on everything is evil. Active avoidance of dissenting information, and you dehumanize your opponents. If you dehumanize people, it is much easier to be brutal against them. Now, this quick one, I know we're running out of time, but we have to talk about this, the erosion of moral authority. Groups that excuse harm in their own group while claiming moral superiority eventually lose credibility, internally and externally. Believers notice, observers notice, and dissenters are silenced or they leave the group. And opponents use this erosion to encourage more defection. I said it's easy to find pictures of stupid parents taking their children to pride parades where they are in a hypersexualized environment, and it's making these children normalize sexuality. It's terrible. Oh, Frank said, sorry, I missed the first 30 minutes. That's what the recording is for. Go on, anybody that missed if you go, even if you just go on my X feed at Dr. Dina 1, you go on YouTube, you go on Rumble, you can find the whole episode. There's an internal psychological cost, though. This unresolved incongruence where you're saying one thing and you can't let yourself think about how it doesn't fit your group. You're excusing all these horrible things. Your brain takes that information in, whether you like it or not. It causes chronic defensiveness, suppressed guilt or shame. You will project the wrong onto your enemies. We see that a lot, where we have a lot of left progressive people. You can tell what they're doing wrong by what they accuse conservatives of. They project everything. Emotional exhaustion.
So true. That's so true.
And anxiety and depression. And here's an internal cost. They often mistake the discomfort experienced for threat from the outside. So I'm uncomfortable because you've done something to me. No, it's internal contradiction. You're seeing yourself as morally righteous and you're supporting every evil thing that's ever come up on the planet. This perception of external threat may also increase aggression and violence. They just don't want to recognize it. I have people in my family like this who get aggressive when they are confronted with information that shows that they may be wrong or even just mistaken. And this combination is going to increase the severity of their selective outrage. Okay, here's some quick questions. I know we're running a little over time, but I don't care. It's quick questions to ask to slow the defensiveness and invite reflection. Now, please note, I pose these as you questioning the other person, but it's also useful every once in a while to ask these questions to yourself. Would you respond the same way if the roles, the person, the side were reversed? I have yet to find a left progressive who will even consider it. It's too painful, too much cognitive dissonance from this. What evidence would change your mind? And are you avoiding it? Are you protecting a value or protecting a side? Who benefits from your outrage and who is harmed by your silence? Note,
I love these questions.
If the person gets angry and aggressive when those questions are posed. Note if the conversation reverts to name calling or belittling as a response, which is usually what happens. In-group bias and identity fusion is often a result of indoctrination, mental illness, or personality disorder. And it can make consideration and reflection psychologically overwhelming. So sometimes you have to pose this a little at a time. because it is really, and as I said, I don't know why they keep calling it cognitive dissonance, because it actually causes a physiological reaction as well. And for
Yes.
some of these people,
Yes.
they are so overwhelmed that they almost go into a fugue state if they actually confront information that they cannot dispute that shows that they were wrong. But it's still worthwhile to try. Charlie Kirk did this brilliantly. Objective evidence of significant bias in judgment and response may offer a breakthrough for those immersed in an ideology bubble. What Charlie would often show people is that there was real, genuine, rigorous evidence disputing the health, the moral righteousness of left progressive views. And when they saw it, most of them said, I've never even seen this before. And we talked about how the mainstream hides it. Selective outrage doesn't make us safer or more just. It just makes us more predictable, more divided, and less honest. Real integrity begins where loyalty ends and principle holds firm. So I'm going to be posting this now because I've been having trouble with X. Again, things aren't working. Technical difficulties, as my daughter used to say when she was little. I'm going to be posting this on X. You can also watch it on Rumble. You can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it on Daily Cloud. Any questions or comments, please let me know. And Frank says there's always hope, faith, hope, and charity. Absolutely. If you want to hire me to come and work for you I have a lot of work, go to my website and see all the things I do. And if you'd like to book me, here's the booking information. You can just screenshot it and then contact me. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Melinda, for taking time from your busy work. And hopefully I will see you again soon. And by the way, everyone, while we're freezing here in the States, it is summer in Australia. So, I'm trying to send me some warmth. Really.
I will. I'm sending warmth your way. I'm sending it your way.
Well, thank you. And I'll see you again soon. Okay.
Bye.